One rocket, 27 satellites, and a countdown where every second decides success. If you've ever watched a launch and wondered what is really happening from T10 to orbit, this is the flight plan in plain English, no drama, just how the machine works. On September 25, 2025, United Launch Alliance's Atlas V-551 lifted off from Cape Canaveral at 8:09 a.m. Eastern, carrying 27 of Amazon's Project Kuiper satellites. In 10 minutes of video, we'll unpack the why, the how, and the so what, why low Earth orbit needs so many craft, how a two-stage rocket actually threads the needle to space, and what changes on the ground when constellations grow. Why launch so many satellites at once, low Earth orbit trades size for speed. Bringing satellites closer to Earth cuts latency signals, spend less time in transit so pages load faster, and calls feel snappier. That matters most where fiber is thin, rural towns, ships at sea, scientific outposts, and disaster zones. Kuiper is designed as a multiplane network of more than 3,000 satellites, each doing a small job, together forming a resilient mesh. Today's flight is part of that mesh. After early prototypes, Amazon moved to production batches, roughly 24 per ride to an initial orbit, followed by weeks of raising altitude and sliding into assigned lanes. Think of it like moving a fleet of delivery vans out of a depot. They leave in groups, take on preliminary checks, then fan out to cover their neighborhoods. Now, the countdown. At T10 minutes, the range is green, and the weather is green. The rocket is already fueled with super cold propellants, and the ground computers hand authority to the flight computer. The job from now to liftoff is about stability. Keep temperatures and pressures in tight bands, so nothing flashes to gas at the wrong time or sloshes the wrong way. A launch is less like lighting a fuse and more like synchronizing an orchestra. Hundreds of systems must hit the same beat. What's flying today is a 551. Those 3 digits describe the hardware. First digit, a 5-meter fairing roomy enough for dense satellite stacks. Second digit, 5 solid rocket boosters strapped around the core, there for raw punch off the pad. Third digit, 1 RL-10 engine on the upper stage. The first stage, called the Common Core Booster, burns kerosene and liquid oxygen using a single RD-180 engine, high thrust, high reliability. The Centaur upper stage runs liquid hydrogen and oxygen, lower thrust, but extremely efficient, perfect for sculpting orbits with fine precision. T2 minutes, pressurization, tanks firm up as the vehicle transitions from being helped by ground systems to standing on its own internal pressure. Imagine sealing a soda bottle before you shake it. You're creating a stable, predictable structure, so the next event the lighting behaves exactly as modeled. T0, ignition. The RD-180 roars to life first, computers verify healthy chamber pressures, and then the solids join the party. Hold down clamps, release. The Atlas rises above the tower, and seconds later the roll program turns the rocket to the precise heading needed for its target track. The solids do the heavy lifting early, shoving the stack through the dense lower atmosphere and buying the vehicle precious velocity while the air is still thick. A little over a minute into flight comes max-Q, maximum dynamic pressure, the moment where speed and air density produce the highest aerodynamic stress. Pilots talk about never exceed speeds. Rockets manage max-Q by throttling and guidance that keep structural loads inside agreed limits. Pass max-Q and you've crossed the worst of the shaking. The air thins, drag melts away. Every kilogram burn now buys more speed than a few seconds ago. Around a minute and a half, the solid boosters burn out and fall away. Dead weight is the enemy. Shedding it instantly improves performance. The core stage keeps burning on the RD-180, accelerating towards staging. Once the rocket is high enough that air resistance is negligible, the fairing separates. The payload no longer needs an aerodynamic shell. Dropping the nose saves mass and makes the rest of ascent more efficient. Main engine cutoff mecho is the end of first stage work. The stages separate cleanly, and Centaur takes over. If the first stage is a sprinter off the blocks, Centaur is a marathoner with steady, precise strides. Its single RL-10 engine lights and places the stack into a temporary parking orbit. From their many missions follow a 2-burn profile, a first burn to reach a safe orbit, a coast phase to the right spot. A second burn to raise circularize or change the orbit, just enough to start the deployment sequence. Why a coast? Orbital mechanics cares where you push, not just how hard. Waiting until the vehicle is at the right point, often near the line of apsides, means the same second of burn buys more of the change you want. It's smart timing rather than brute force. Now to the heart of today's mission. 27 satellites don't pop out like a spring-loaded toy. They release in batches, each with deliberate timing and slight differences in push, so they won't re-rendezvous by accident. It's like cars leaving a stacked parking garage one after another, with a traffic officer making sure nobody merges too close. The first orbit is usually lower than the final home altitude. That lets engineers run health checks and trim out any small misalignments without paying the full energy cost of climbing high first. After checkout, each satellite raises its orbit toward roughly 630 kilometers and drifts into its assigned plane. The choreography continues there, phasing evenly spaces neighbors around the ring, so coverage is smooth, with handoffs between satellites feeling invisible to a user on the ground. Some craft talk to each other via laser links, moving data across the sky before it ever drops to a ground station. Others lean more on ground gateways and fiber backbones. Either way, the design principle is the same: keep the path short and make the network robust against a single point of failure. Why use Atlas V551 for this job? Performance and packaging. The 5-meter fairing houses a dense stack comfortably, and the 5 solids give the vehicle the margin to carry that mass to the right drop-off point. Atlas V is in its retirement run, but it remains a proven bus with well-understood behavior, valuable when you're trying to put dozens of identical pieces into predictable lanes. As ULAS Vulcan ramps up and other providers share the manifest, these batches become a scheduling puzzle as much as a rocket puzzle. There's a business logic under the plume. Each successful batch lowers the cost per working satellite, not just from economies of scale, but from learning curves in integration and operations. Constellations aren't useful until coverage is wide and handoffs are clean. Putting up clusters of 24 at a time moves you quickly across the threshold where service feels always there rather than sometimes available. What changes on Earth as these rides stack up? Coverage fills in where terrain or distance made fiber uneconomical. A fishing boat in the Pacific, a clinic in a mountain valley, a school on a dusty road, all a path to the same apps and updates a city takes for granted. Networks also gain resilience. When a flood snaps a trunk line or an earthquake crushes conduits, a dish under the open sky can bridge the gap while crews repair the ground. That said, growth brings duties. Constellations expand the traffic in low Earth orbit, so operators file and follow debris mitigation plans, design deorbits that clear lanes at end of life, and adjust brightness to reduce sky glow for astronomers. The technology is capable. The stewardship is the test. The license to operate in space is social as much as regulatory, earned by how carefully firms share the neighborhood. Step back, and a modern launch is a story about coordination. Sensors, software, and teams sculpt a narrow window in weather and time. A machine that weighs hundreds of tons behaves like a watch. And within an hour, dozens of new nodes join a network that shortens the distance between people and information. 10 minutes of flame buys years of service, and the quiet benefit is measured not in spectacle, but in milliseconds cut from a signal as trip. That's today's flight from T10 to orbit. One countdown, 27 satellites. Another ring in a growing web that aims to make offline harder to find. If organizing time once required one line on a map at Greenwich, organizing the sky today requires thousands of lines moving in lockstep. Want more clear, no-fluff explainers? Subscribe.